Hey, Geekscapists, welcome to a brand new Geekscape podcast. I'm Jonathan London, your host. If this is your first Geekscape, well, where have you been all our lives? I'm not going to complain. I'm just glad you're a part of this now. Geekscape's been around about 15 years, and we've gone through all sorts of growing pains. Sometimes we have all sorts of different shows. Maybe we shouldn't have all sorts of different shows. Maybe we should be a little bit more consistent with the kind of shows we do. No, we basically do the kind of show I want to do depending on the week. So sometimes we talk movies, video games, and comic book news. Sometimes we do a review. Sometimes I do a one-on-one with my good friend Ian, and we go on a deep dive of like the latest like Marvel or Star Wars shows or movies. Sometimes that's a Geekscape. Sometimes like the ones that are going to be coming up here in a few weeks, we're at like a convention. Like we're going to be at San Diego Comic-Con. That'll be some Geekscapes you're going to get on the feed. And so that'll be like Geekscape on location. Let's call it Geekscape on location. And then some Geekscapes, a lot of Geekscapes actually, like the one we're going to have right now, is just me and a filmmaker or an actor or creative. Maybe they're writers, maybe they work in comics, maybe they work in video games. And we just do a one-on-one. So this episode is me and my good friend Brett Levner. Brett and I went to grad school together, and she is making her next she's making her next feature film. It's called Riot and Bloom, and we're going to talk all about it. We're going to talk about her past films. We're going to be like, hey, why have the Geekscapes not heard of you? And if they haven't, they should, and hopefully Geekscape will remedy that whole thing. I got to tell you, speaking of remedies, it finally happened. Jonathan caught COVID. That's right. I'm coming out of COVID right now. So if you hear anything in my voice, it's a little bit, that's because I'm coming out of COVID. Last night wasn't too bad. The night before was kind of rough. And then 3 nights ago was like pretty bad. But that being said, I'm coming out of it now. It's a little icky. Feels like I'm pretty stopped up. And if you are watching the stream of Obi-Wan Kenobi, the last episode of Geekscape, we did a stream, Ian and I talking Obi-Wan Kenobi. You can hear it here on the podcast. The podcast, I did a pretty good job of cleaning up the sniffles. But on the stream, you can definitely tell Jonathan's kind of going over that COVID cliff. And a few hours after we recorded that live Obi-Wan Kenobi episode, yeah, it hit me, pretty hard. Thank goodness for those vaccines and that booster, because 3 days later, and I feel like I'm at the end of it, and I'll be back to infecting people this weekend. Just kidding. I still got to quarantine a couple days. So I had to cancel my bachelor weekend. Doesn't that stink? Yeah, I had to cancel my bachelor weekend. It was supposed to be last weekend. Nope. Ian Kerner, I think, got mad at me too, because I was like, Ian, when are we going to do Obi-Wan Kenobi? He's like, well, I got to renegotiate things with Stephanie because we were supposed to be doing her bachelor weekend. So she went and made other plans, but now I'm asking for her time back. And then like, how much time do you need to take from me, Jonathan? I already put a bunch of time away for the bachelor stuff, and then that didn't happen. And now you're asking me to do this Obi-Wan Kenobi special. So just let's make it worth his while. And if you finish the Obi-Wan Kenobi show on Disney Plus, go back and listen to the episode that just hit the feed. Ian, it took a little bit of wrangling to get him to that episode after I had him reserve an entire weekend for my bachelor party that didn't even happen because I was coming down with COVID. And hopefully enjoy it. Share it with a friend. I want to remind you that this episode is brought to you by our good friends at NordVPN. NordVPN.com/Geekscape is where you're going to go. They're going to hook you up with all sorts of awesome threat protection and 1 month free of NordVPN. They got all sorts of cool deals for you just for being a Geekscape listener. So put in Geekscape as a little coupon code on your checkout, and NordVPN is going to hook you up. I remember when I went to Crimea. Is it in Ukraine or is it Russia? I don't know. I didn't know then. But in 2019, I went to Crimea. I was invited to do some comedy there. And I knew I wasn't going to go without a trusty VPN to keep me out of Putin's claws. And I used NordVPN. So it's really cool that they came back as a Geekscape sponsor for this month. And I would like for you to reward them by going to NordVPN.com/Geekscape and telling them Jonathan sent you and you'd like your deals. There's a free 30 back money back guarantee. A free. Oh, Jonathan, let's say that 3 times fast. Show's live, baby. A free 30-day back money guarantee if you're not happy. All right. Before I totally blow it, let's go ahead and start the show. All right, Geekscapists, it's time to do some Geekscape. My good friend Brett Levner is the guest on the show. Her last movie, The Track, I saw at Dancing with the Films a few years ago, and we can talk about that movie. She shot it in Las Vegas, where she moved. We went to grad school together in New York, and then she's made a couple feature films since. Her next one is called Riot and Bloom. She's funding it right now on Indiegogo, putting it together, and she kind of has a unique approach to putting this film together. She's using a lot of her UNLV students and those resources to make a feature film, and it's not a student film. Brett is a very, very capable professional filmmaker. She also, she's like Indiana Jones. Indiana Jones goes around the globe and steals artifacts. Let's just call it what it is. He steals artifacts for museums and stuff. Then he goes and he plays professor. Well, that's like Brett. Brett goes and makes feature independent films, and then she comes back and she plays professor. So she's like Indiana Jones. Let's just call her like a filmmaking Indiana Jones. Here she is, my good friend Brett Levner, who I went to grad school with. That's a good introduction,
Hi.
Right?
That was an excellent introduction.
That's an okay one.
I'm saving that forever. You're good. This is so funny because I heard your voice for the first time in a while, and it was it brought me back to screenwriting class at Columbia. You sound exactly the same. It's fun to reconnect because you feel like no time has passed whenever I, run into friends from grad school.
I don't know, Brett. I don't recall Jonathan in 2001 and 2 having COVID. He didn't sound like this.
True.
He didn't sound like COVID, Jonathan. Same smart ass remarks, same stupid stuff and blank stare, but he didn't have the COVID.
I too just got over it too, so I understand exactly what you're talking about. But it reminds me. Did you ever see the movie Broadcast News?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember when Albert Brooks has this sweat attack when he goes on camera? I think called the flop sweats. Well, for me, whenever I am recorded live, I start to clear my throat incessantly like a tick. So if that happens, I apologize.
That's okay. Listen, the Geekscape has put up with so much worse with me. So
okay.
no, they're like, man, you're gonna come off like a professional. Is this your first podcast, Brett?
It's my first podcast. I've never been on a podcast. Your intro blew me away. I feel like this is too high a level for me to start out at. I'm nervous, but hopefully I'll go with it.
You've been around white guys though before, right?
Yeah.
How is this your first podcast?
I'm weird. I've kind of I like people who like NPR and are liberal and listen to podcasts, but I don't really do it myself. I'm kind of old school TV. It was hard for me even to adjust to streaming, to be honest. I'm weird that way. I'm old school that way.
Well, Brett, you and I haven't seen each other a lot since grad school. I did go to see your film play.
That was very nice. You showed up. You showed up and surprised us, and that was really awesome.
Wait, do a lot of people not show up?
No.
Really?
It was a really nice gesture, especially I feel like the people from film school are like your family in a way. You may not see them all the time, but when you do, it's just you've had this connection, especially since we went to grad school during 9/11. I think that kind of brought us all together.
That happened a week within us getting there. We were all excited. We're wide-eyed. We're going to make films in New York. We're going to run in the streets and shoot our films. And we're in New York a week before 9/11. I was still on my futon, but they hadn't sent the frame yet. It was just the futon couch or the futon cushion, the frame hadn't arrived. And I remember still kind of laying on my stomach on that sofa part, the cushion. And I was on AOL Instant Messenger with my friend
Yes.
Tommy Fad in Austin, wishing him a birthday, which I'll never forget, that 9/11's his birthday. And he
Mm.
said, "Hey man, what the hell just happened in New York?" And I checked the news sites, and sure enough, like everything started slowing down. The dial-up internet started slowing down, and then before you know it, sirens just shooting down Broadway next to our place in New York. And we'll never forget. Remember wandering around campus that day?
It was heavy. I didn't go to campus because I was living at home. Luckily, I was one of those people. My parents, I lived with my father, had an apartment in Manhattan, so I didn't have to pay for room
Oh
and
wow.
board. But I remember he was like, "Don't go downtown, just stay here." So I wandered outside. I was up on 82nd Street, but I could the smell in the air. You could smell the burning
Yeah.
of the, and then you could just. I went to the water, I looked down, and everyone was kind of just coming out and kind of gathering and just kind of like in shock. But I do remember for some reason you going down or hearing about how you went downtown with your camera and you took some footage or something. That's what I
Yeah.
remember.
I had this high 8 camera that we used to shoot a bunch of stuff. I had a GL1, a mini DV Canon GL1.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember making my way down to like the Southern Battery, or at least in Brooklyn, and shooting the Southern Battery, and you just saw like tons of smoke billowing out of the bottom of. Now, you know what? With as much of a shit show as the U.S. has become recently, like that's just another Tuesday. It seems like I hate to be insensitive, but like,
Yeah.
damn, like I was thinking about this literally yesterday. These are the kind of dumb thoughts that go through my head. I was thinking about the Supreme Court decisions from the last week,
Right.
which are those are kind of brutal. And I was thinking back to like these narrow misses and like how our country has been taken over by this minority, this
Mhm.
religious minority, and how we're turning into like a Taliban. And
Right.
people are like, "This is Geekscape. Can we just talk about Star Trek?" Yes, Star Trek: Strange New Worlds is excellent, and I loved this week's episode. And I watched all 10 episodes of Umbrella Academy season 3, and I love it. Anyway, that's your update. But I was thinking like how we got here, and like when the last sense of having innocence and like all that was. And honestly, it obviously ended at 9/11 in a lot of senses, and then we started having like wars on metaphor, like wars on concepts. Like here we go, we have a war on terror now for the next 20 years. But I think our pinnacle, because a lot of people have been critical of the United States recently. I think our pinnacle as the United States of America. You know what? It was Blink-182's "Enema of the State." When Blink-182's "Enema of the State" came out, that was the pinnacle of the United States. I think
like
that
the
was
the high point.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah,
I think and it sounds weird, but "Enema of the State" came out in 1999 that summer.
Was it
and
1999? Okay.
Yeah, and everybody was cool. We were still listening to Barbie Girl. We hadn't really gone totally into rap rock yet.
You're right. We were still innocent. But do
everything
you think
was still pure.
Yeah.
And then it all kind of went downhill. Was it maybe because of "Enema of the State"? Did Blink-182's "Enema of the State" cause the American downfall?
It was a big enema, let out a lot. No, I don't know, literal enema. But maybe that's why I like to follow Travis recently and all his. Well, he was just in the hospital.
He was.
I don't know if you saw that. Travis from Blink-182.
Travis Barker, yeah.
Yeah, but he's okay. But
we interviewed him a few months after that.
Really?
Yeah, so I did a radio show in college,
mm-hmm.
in undergrad, which here, hi, welcome to This Why Geekscape's Geekscape. And so, Jason Elliott in Houston says it was pancreatitis. Wow. Well, Travis.
Yes, I'm glad he's okay.
So we used to be on the radio in Philly, and we interviewed Blink-182, and we dressed up as Mexican wrestlers. We dressed up as luchadors to do the interview. And we were backstage at the Electric Factory in Philly, and we meet Blink-182, and they're like, "Oh, we're going to set up some equipment, and the Blink guys are going to be ushered into the room to do the interview." And we get into luchador outfits, and Mark and Tom and Travis come in, and they take one look at us in wrestling outfits, ready to do an interview. And Travis is like, "Yeah, you guys got this one. I'm gonna sit this one out." That interview's somewhere with Mark and Tom. I'm sure Kevin has it, but Yeah, Travis dipped on that one. He's like, I'm not. No, whatever the hell this is, I don't want any part of it.
It scared him, but in a good way.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
I don't really remember too much of grad school. I don't think I was that present in grad school, which may be indicative of my lack of a present film career. What? But like,
shut up. You
but
left,
yeah.
or like you like graduated, like you know, like how you could. Our school was 2 years, but you could stay on and
Mhm.
continue as it. But I felt like you left and went. You had always wanted to go back to LA. I felt that was your like. I don't know. I know you're not from LA, but you had a connection to LA that kind of drew you. And I'm from, you know, born and raised in New York. I never really had that. I did eventually move out there for a little bit, but so I don't know if that was what drew you know what you were talking about, kind of like being pulled out there versus at Columbia.
Yeah, I knew I was going to end up in LA. A lot of my friends from undergrad had ended up there. I was dating somebody who grew up there. I was, I mean, the weekend after we finished those necessary classes, I was out. I was in the U-Haul. I was out. Brett,
But
why are you in?
Yeah.
What?
Sorry, I like to talk about you, Jonathan. Should I interview you?
No. That's the last thing the Geekscapists want, is to hear more Jonathan stories. Which, I mean, how did you end up in Vegas? That's what I want to know.
Oh, okay.
Because I didn't know you were in Vegas until Steve Soul's wedding. Steve Soul's wedding was the first time I was like, oh, you're in Vegas.
That was a good moment for me. That was a pivotal moment for me. So
that was your enema of the state.
Yes, that's where the shit let loose.
Okay.
Okay. So I went to grad school. But I went to undergrad too, as in film in New York, and worked in production for 3 years. I worked at MTV after undergrad. As first I was an intern, and then I was a PA at MTV in their docs department. There used to be a part of there was MTV News and Docs back in the day. This is like 95. 94, 95. And I was like right down the hall from John Norris and Kurt Loder. And I was in a little cubicle, and I just ran around and did, I have some stories, but you know, like I had to get Snoop Dogg pot. He was the only celebrity allowed to smoke pot in the TRL studio. You know,
that was like a rule.
Yeah. I did all these little weird errands, and, you know, worked on some different shows, like, one of the series called Diary. I got to follow around Katie Holmes, got to follow around Jessica Biel, and Ryan Reynolds. Anyway, that was like 3 years before I ended up deciding, you know what, I really want to study directing fiction. Like I want to go back to work with actors, because that's what I really loved. So I applied to grad school and got in. So 3 years after undergrad, we went to Columbia, and that's 2001. And was there for 2 years. And I liked the experience, because for me, I was sort of like an introverted, shy person that needed time to develop. And I wasn't, while I had worked for 3 years in the industry and production, I didn't really know what my voice was, and I needed more time, I think, and it provided me that. And it was, for me, a great experience. But after grad school, and I hung out there for a few years after, my dad passed away. Like, he had gotten sick, and it had caused me to postpone doing my thesis film and everything. So when you guys graduated, like our class, I couldn't graduate. I kind of postponed it a year. And but I did, and actually did a thesis film about the experience of taking care of my dad. And it was actually really good and cathartic. And I don't regret that. I'm glad I had that year off to take care, be with him. But it kind of pushed me into a relationship with my first husband, who we'll just call him Sam. That's not his real name, but with Sam. And
did I know Sam?
I think you knew him. Yeah. He worked. We met working at the equipment room at our grad school.
Yeah, I think I know Sam.
Did you not like Sam? Sam had a bad reputation, kind of.
I was neither here nor there on Sam.
Sam.
I think I've shared a Sam story on the podcast.
What?
Well, I remember Sam's 8 to 12. Do you remember the 8 to 12?
I don't even know it. No.
Well, you know the 8 to 12. After our first year at school,
I don't remember his.
We had to. Well, nobody. Well, I did. This is why. Everybody had to do an 8 to 12. After the first year of film school, Geekscape we had to spend the summer after our first year of classes doing an 8 to 12 minute film. And somebody had to write yours, and then somebody else had to produce yours, and then you as the third party had to direct them, and then you all in turn had to write one and produce one for 2 other students, but round robin type of thing. And when you presented, the first years would sit in on your 8 to 12. So going into your second year, you had a bunch of people going into their first year who had just gotten to Columbia, sitting on your 8 to 12. And I sat in on Sam's 8 to 12. And it was clear that Sam had thrown out the script to the 8 to 12 and probably shot whatever the hell he wanted over the weekend or week prior. And it was pretty rando, experimental stuff. And we sat through it. And it was like, and it was not 8 to 12. It was hard 20. It was hard 20, 22 minutes. It was pretty random. And I'm neither here nor there on Samuel, but I do remember being a little taken aback after sitting through 22 minutes of visual and audio assault in this thing. And I think Sam would admit that it was assaulting as well. It just felt like pulling a student film out of your ass, right?
Pompous.
You're not my words. And so I remember the teachers being like, basically saying in the nicest language possible, like, what the fuck was that? And they tried to pull anything.
That's what I said after we got married.
They tried to be like, hey, like, what was that? What was that? What was the motivation for this? And the defense across the board was, well, y'all just didn't get it.
Right.
Y'all just didn't get it. And it was just like, what the no, dude, you literally took a camera, pulled this out of your ass in the last week and a half when you had all summer to do this with actual collaborators. Right. And we just sat through it. So my rule now as a teacher myself is if a student does that, the whole class has to sit through it. Like, just good. Like if you bring in a project that didn't do the work, and you like, the class has to sit through it, and you have to weather the slings and arrows that come with it, Right. And that's what I remember the most about our friend Sam. And then seeing him again at Steve Soul's wedding and knowing that y'all were married, because I did not know that you and Sam had gotten married. The person known as Sam.
What had happened was like, kind of like, we were younger, whatever. It wasn't the right partnership. It wasn't the right pairing. We ended up getting divorced. We didn't belong together, but it was like happening at a time where I was going through this, like, situation with my dad passing, and maybe, my only child. I didn't really have that support system, and he should have just been a boyfriend that ran its course, but it kind of ended up in becoming something else. But it was actually a lesson, going through that divorce, and that happened now 8 years ago, was like one of the heaviest times of my life. Even like with losing my father, this was like, going through divorce was like heavy, and you start questioning yourself and like who you are, and like comparing yourself. And I really went through a dark period. And that's how I decided, I wasn't ready then, but now that I've had some distance, I want to make this film called Riot and Bloom, because it's addressing divorce, and that like you can survive it, and like especially specifically for a woman, like what you go through the process and finding yourself again. So that's sort of kind of but anyway, during the course of being married to Sam, we ended up moving to LA, giving that a shot, which I didn't like because I can't drive basically. I'm from New York, born and raised. I'm a horrible driver. I remember like taking the GPS and just avoiding the highways. So I would take like the 2-hour route to go somewhere on the side streets because I was too scared to get on the highway. Merging freaked me out. I just didn't fit in LA. It wasn't my thing. So we moved up to the Bay Area in San Francisco for about a few years. And that's where I discovered teaching. I ended up taking like a part-time, like a summer class just for pay the bills in between shooting reality television. So I saw there was like this like class to teach editing. I think it's Final Cut just for the summer. I was like, okay, cool. If I do that, then I don't have to travel. Because at the time I was working on a reality show called Bridezillas, and I was like a field producer. And so I would go with these brides and just film them. And, just it was chaos. And
Brett, personally, are you just in hell at this point?
Well, on the Bridezillas? Okay,
No,
listen.
well, you're like,
Oh,
it's a part of you saying, like, this is after your father's died.
yeah.
You're,
Yes.
you're,
It's a
you're.
lot.
I mean, because remember, at Steve's wedding, I wasn't with the person I'm with now either. I was
Right.
married at that wedding too. Like when we were at Steve's wedding, you and I were both in different relationships, married.
That's true.
Yes. So when you say that this film is about divorce, this and how difficult that was, it resonates with me. So I imagine your father's just died. You don't find, you moved to LA with Samuel. You then moved to the Bay Area with Samuel. And now you're like a couple years removed from film school, and you're an incredible filmmaker. And we knew that in
Oh,
film school. Remember when you kicked my pants out up and down the street on the
what?
Coca-Cola Filmmaker? Remember when
Oh,
you did
please.
that?
Please.
Remember when we met Ben Affleck and Matt Damon, but you're the one
That
that
was
won?
awesome. That was awesome. I forget. I was too shy to go. Okay, so me and Jonathan were both Coca-Cola. What's it called? Coca-Cola Refreshing Filmmaker Contest was for film students, and we both got selected from a big group to make our films. Like only I think there was 5 of us, and we each got like 5 grand.
There were 10.
Oh, there's 10 of us.
Yeah,
Okay.
there were 10 of us, and it
Yeah.
was like, and out of Columbia, it was you and me, Seth Michael Donsky.
Oh yeah.
I haven't talked to him in a while, and then there was one undergrad kid,
Susie, I thought.
and Susie Unessi,
Yeah,
and then so Columbia kicked ass. Out of the 10
that's true.
kids in the country who got to direct those Coca-Cola things, and Geekscape, is, you know what we're talking about. You ever been? I think the Sprite brand is in charge of it now. Whenever you go to the movies, maybe like AMC or something, there'll be a short film before the movie that is kind of heavy on the Sprite stuff or on the Coca-Cola stuff, and it usually takes place in a movie theater or something involving movies. You'll have a filmmaker be like, hey, I'm so and so, and this is my Coca-Cola refreshing film, and you have to sit through like this 40-50 second little film before your movie starts, and it's basically just a glorified like ad for Coke or for Sprite. Well, yeah, there was a contest, and it was 10 people, 10 teams. Jim Pugnarelli was my producer. Steve Soul was yours.
Yes.
And you had to pitch like storyboards and shot lists and all that stuff. And then they pick 1 out of the 10. They pick 10, which is already kick ass. They bring it to LA because it was in conjunction with Project Greenlight,
Yes.
that Matt Damon and Ben Affleck show.
Yes.
We got to like hang out with Matt and Ben.
But I was too shy to even like approach them. I was frozen with
serious?
fear. I was
and
frozen.
You're the one who won.
I couldn't. It was
out of
like
all 10 of us,
it was
out
too
of
real.
10 filmmakers from across the country, your film was the one that was actually shown in theaters.
I was frozen. It was too.
Oh,
yeah.
I walked right up to
See,
Matt.
but you always
I walked right up to Ben and Matt. I was like, put her there. I was like, put her there, partner. Snoochie
I
boochies.
like that about you. You always have
that
been,
I'm an idiot.
No, you're self-confident and you're extroverted and you're. And
It's
I've always
naivety.
been the opposite. But I think I've come around in a more. It took me some time, but I think I'm there now. So yeah.
that whole thing where we met with Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, you didn't even talk to them?
Oh no. Like I think I've always felt like not good enough. That's something that I think a lot of artists fight with, self-confidence or insecurities. And then you use your art, you use your films to kind of deal or tackle with those things. But I think to be honest with you, my 20s were like awful. I think 20s and 30s suck because you're always comparing yourself to everyone. At least I was comparing yourself to everyone else. Like, like, what is everyone else doing? What am I doing? Versus I think now that I'm in my 40s, I'm like, okay, fuck it. I don't give a shit. I'm doing what makes me happy. So I've kind of found my own world. I'm in Vegas. Who the hell would even, people are like, why the hell are you moving to Vegas? It worked. I like really actually like it. It took me some time. At first I was like, I'll just stay here a year or two. But because I got a job at the university to teach, but I ended up in here 10 years and I like really love it. And I just found a thing that works for me. It doesn't work, wouldn't be for everybody, but for me, I enjoy it.
Well, talk to me about Vegas, because you're in San Francisco. You're chasing Bridezillas around for this reality show. And then was it because of Sam that you moved to Vegas, or because you got a job at UNLV, or what was the story of moving into Vegas?
So after grad school, through these moves to LA and San Francisco, I was like paying my bills, the student loans, which are tremendous after going to grad school, by doing reality television. So like I said, Bridezillas, but I also somehow found a niche working as a female field producer shooter on homicide detective shows. Don't ask why. Crime shows, like literal, real, like I followed around homicide detectives for this film show on A&E called The First 48. So yeah. So I was embedded with them. I would live in they put you up in an apartment with like corporate housing, and they give you a murder phone, and you'd be on call 24/7. And it was like 2 producers in each city. So it's multiple cities. I was in Tucson for the most part, and which didn't have that many murders, which was kind of cool. So like we'd have maybe a couple murders a month, while some other people were in Detroit and they're working multiple murders a day. So most of the time I would go to the movies, but I had to have the thing with me at all times. And like, believe it or not, the funniest thing, well, it's sort of funny, but the first crime scene I went to, the guy who I was actually, there's 2 of us. So he was like I was the rookie, and he had done it for a long time, and he was going to show me the ropes. He was from Columbia, Matt Watts, maybe, I think is his name. He was going to show me the ropes. So we get the first night. He says, okay, if there's a call, they're going to call me, and then I'll call you, and then we'll drive together to the crime scene. I said, okay.
And these are real crimes, obviously. Like
they're murders.
It's a docu-series. Wow.
Yes, okay. It's real. How the hell? I had to sign this liability form. I'm like, whatever. I got to pay my student bills. I'll do what I have to do. We had to wear bulletproof vests at sometimes. But okay, going back to the first crime scene. I go to sleep the first night. I get a call, and it's not Matt. It's the dispatcher telling me the address for the murder. And I was like, what the fuck? So I go, and down the hall, he lives at the different apartment down the hall, and I knock on the door. I'm like, they called me, and he's totally drunk. And he's like, I can't go. I didn't think there'd be a murder tonight because I got wasted. You're going to have to go by yourself. And I'm like, what? Murder? This is the first murder. So I'm like, what? I'm like a green rookie. So I take my little camera, my bag of my backpack, and they give you a rental car. And I take the GPS. I'm driving into like, this is actually in Cincinnati, to like a rough part of Cincinnati. And then I see on the street, there was the crime tape, and the police cars were lined up. And I had my badge because I had met and checked in with the detectives earlier. So I get out of the car, I park, and they let me in because I have my badge. And I see the detectives, the homicide detectives across the way near the body. And as I'm walking, I'm kicking something because it's pitch black. It's like 3 a.m. That's the witching hour when actually they'd have the most murders. And what the fuck am I kicking? I'm kicking the shell casings to the crime scene because they hadn't put the little numbers down yet. And I couldn't see what I was doing. The detective's like, you effing idiot from New York, go back to New York, we don't need you, screaming at me. Anyway, it took me weeks to re-earn their trust. I had to bring them donuts, and they do like donuts. The cops will tell you, oh, I don't like donuts. You can bring them donuts though. I won them over with that. And there was scenes where I was slipping in blood. I mean, there was funny parts, but there was also kind of really sad parts. And I felt like eventually the whole thing felt exploitative to me. And I was like, I couldn't handle it. I'm like, I'm filming people. I feel like we're taking advantage of people, but also I didn't want to be filming people being their kid, their child's being killed, and you got to notify next of kin. And we were told to film. And I was just like, this isn't for me. And I felt bad. It wasn't, I tried to be that, but I couldn't be that. So
you're also destroying evidence while you're there.
Like, exactly.
Yeah.
It wasn't a good idea probably to have us there. Ultimately, the show got sued, not with one of my episodes, but they got sued because someone was accidentally, a little girl got killed during the filming of when they were trying to seek out one of the suspects. They put a smog, I don't know what those called, the thing that create a fog so they can go in, the detectives, and find them, the suspect. And a little girl got killed by accident, and they said it was most likely that the detectives were acting in a way that was for the television show, not how they would normally act. So they're actually a case. And I actually, I didn't get subpoenaed or anything, but I did get called by like the morning news one day saying, hey, we Googled and we have you listed as the first 48 camera operator. Do you want to be on the news with us. And I was like, no, that's all right. Thank you. But
Wow.
yeah, it was a disaster. I don't know if it was a disaster. There was elements of it that were a good show, but there was no way to 100% not be exploitative of the people. And it made me feel, I felt bad. I didn't want to do that anymore. So that's how I kind of got into teaching.
And that brought you to Vegas.
Yeah,
and
so
Vegas just offered you full time or what?
Yeah, so I got into teaching in San Francisco. I got my first teaching, just a class. And I'm like, holy shit, this is great. I love teaching because I got to show clips of like my favorite movies. And like, I'm like, and you get paid to sit in a room. You don't have to wear a bulletproof vest and like be hiding behind a car.
You get to ruin evidence of
this
a crime
is more
scene.
Me. Yeah. This is more me.
I got to tell you, Brett, Rainy Valley on Twitch says, you know what? A decade of knowing Brett, it is the first time I've ever heard this.
That is actually my collaborator on the film Riot and Bloom. She's the screenwriter with me. So
let's get to that. So we can go back to the whole Vegas of it all.
Yeah.
But the movie that you're on here talking about is your third feature film, your second feature film?
Well, I say it's my second because the first one I'm not embarrassed about, but the first one. So when we were in grad school and we showed the Coke, the Coke thing showed in the theater, a woman from Atlanta, just a regular woman who was not a filmmaker, contacted me and said that she had written a script and she wanted to hire me to be the director and come to Atlanta and shoot it. And they were putting her and her husband were going to put up the funding. And would I like to come and do that? Because she said she saw the film, The Coke Spot. She really, really enjoyed it. And I was only in grad school and I was like, what? And she's going to pay me? I'm like, hell yeah. So me and Ashley Patterson, who was my roommate, I said, but could you get my friend Ashley a job? And Ashley's like, what should I do? I'm like, what do you do? What do you want to do? She's like, I'll do this. I guess I could be the script supervisor. So I'm like, okay, yes, I'm going to bring my friend needs to be the script supervisor just in case these people are crazy. And so me and her went to Atlanta for like a month and a half. And then we shot this film that this woman, Emily Carpenter, wrote and starred in. And it starred Sean Patrick Flannery. And so I got to work with him, which was really cool, from like Boondock Saints. But it definitely, I had no control. I was just basically pointing the camera. She had written it. She had a vision. And it really wasn't in tune with my vision, So I don't know if that was a great experience from just an exercise, but I don't think it was, personal or authentically mine. So I don't know if that was really my film, but
you didn't get murdered. That's a win. When somebody finds you off the internet and is like, hey, I was sitting in a movie theater and I saw your 50-second Coke spot. Do you want to come to Atlanta and be in my movie? Like you're about to get, like you could have ended up in Get Out or something like that. Like, that's what the hell? And I I love Ashley Patterson, but why didn't you invite like somebody bigger like Sean Mullen or Ed McGinty that we went to school with who actually had like if shit goes down, you at least want somebody bigger. Like you're gonna get yourself murdered, Brett.
No, they were nice, but they were okay. So then it led to a second film with them that actually, this is sort of funny. So they kind of had it was sort of like a Christian film ish. But so they wanted to make a second film, and me and Ashley went to go work on that as well. And that one starred Stephen Baldwin. And then he tried to convert me. Once he found out I was Jewish, he totally he pushed me into a corner and was trying to convert me because he's a born again Christian.
Stephen Baldwin from Firefly.
Is that him?
Or
yeah.
He was in the Joss Whedon show.
Yeah,
Firefly.
the dad, yeah.
No, no. I mean, he's not one of the Baldwin brothers.
Yes, he is.
Oh, he is? Oh, then I'm thinking of a different Baldwin.
Brothers.
Oh, boy.
The Hillary's or whatever,
Yeah, okay. So he corners
Bieber's wife's dad.
Okay.
Yeah. Stephen Baldwin is a born-again Christian. He married a nice, Brazilian woman, converted him. So he comes to this movie because this movie has a born-again Christian theme.
And you're going to direct this one too?
Yes, but it fell apart because it also starred Dixie Carter, if you remember her from Designing Women. We were there for 1 week. I was going to direct it. Ashley was going to script supervise, and there was a whole crew. It was, a big budget, not big budget, but big independent budget.
Like $1 million, a couple $100,000?
Yes, $1 million. At least I would say around $1 million. But then this is the thing. This is the kicker. They put us up. They were going to pay us. It was SAG. Everything looked nice. We were in Tennessee in the Smoky Mountains. We had cabins, and there were bears outside at night. Anyway, within 1 week, the whole thing fell apart because the producer, who they met in church, ran off with all the money. He also had sex with the underage, like one of the underage interns or something, and it was a disaster. The whole thing fell apart. So that never happened, but I do have like a little pieces of the clips from it. So that happened too.
That's insane.
I have stories I could tell you. You have no idea. Yeah, I remember the whole thing just fell apart because this guy who was going to be the producer, who had the money, who they met in church, and they were like, they would speak tongues and they put their hands on me and pray over me before I would direct a scene and stuff. I swear.
Oh my God. So, okay. So you didn't make the track, and I remember that one. The track was good. It had Stephen, you guys remember, who was in that one? I almost said Stephen
Trammell.
Sam Trammell from True Blood.
True Blood, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And then let's talk about this one. This is why you're here, Geekscapists. Brett's got this new movie, Riot and Bloom, and my goodness, Brett, we're just catching up. And I mean, this might be a very abusive podcast for the Geekscapists because we're just basically using it as a catch-up. But ultimately, we want you to go to Indiegogo.com and check out Riot and Bloom. It's Brett's new movie that they're fundraising, and Brett's collaborating with a lot of her students and ex-students from UNLV and putting this film together. You know what? I got to tell you, this one's going to be good. Your screenwriter, Rowdy, is in the comments. She's awesome. And I'm excited about this movie. You posted it to Facebook within, I think, moments. I was excited in sharing this thing and inviting you on the podcast because, Brett, I've been a fan of yours and a friend of yours for 20 years. And I'm so excited that you're making a movie that has this attitude to it. It feels like this punk rock kind of cool thing. And I know the basis for the movie because I remember how your marriage with Sam went and how that ended. And so when I read the synopsis for the movie, I was like, oh shit, Brett's done making a movie about what she went through. Can you talk about that at all? Like your relationship with Sam ended and your divorce?
Yeah. Okay. Like 8 years ago, I came out here for a teaching job and he came with me because his job had run its course. And we came out to Vegas, and I said, I got this full-time teaching position at the university out here, UNLV. Maybe I'll stay a couple of years and get my feet wet, and then maybe go back to California, go back to New York. But in the interim, probably a couple of years in, on my 40th birthday, which is where the movie starts, and this is based on reality, my ex-husband and me, Sam, go to dinner, and he tells me over dinner on my 40th birthday that he's been having an affair. So right then it wasn't funny, but now looking back, I can, it works. I think it's funny now. I've had the distance and the therapy, and I said, and I knew in my head, Brett, one day you're going to make a movie about this. Kind of like I was sort of influenced by Nora Ephron, Heartburn, her movie Heartburn, when she told the story of her divorce. And I kind of loved that and the realness of it. But it took me many years to get here. That included like the dating, like all my bad dating stories. Like I included that in this film. I actually, even at one point, I was during the divorce, I'm Jewish, but I decided I was trying to find God. I was trying to find sense. I didn't know anyone else my age. I was in my 30s that was divorced. I didn't know anyone else. I felt like alone and like a loser. I was like, what did I do wrong? Everyone's having kids and all this stuff. So my therapist said, go to this church. And a lot of people find, it helps them. So I went to this big mega church seeking the answers. And to be honest, I did like it because it kind of was like I could be anonymous. And so I would just cry and no one would notice because it was in the dark. And they'd have really cool Christian rock and everything. And some good, the pastor was kind of inspiring. So one day, somehow I was convinced to become baptized. And they had this giant pools, inflatable pools that would be outside the church. And they were like, anyone who wants to be saved, because I thought I did something wrong that I was getting divorced.
Inflatable pools from Walmart, like a slip and slide?
No, big, giant. There were at least 2,000 people in this church every week. Like
Wow.
this was a huge mega church.
Okay.
And then he would do this thing, the pastor, he's like, come on down if you want to find God and find yourself. And I don't know. I just said, okay, I want to do it because I want a second chance. I must have done something wrong to have to be going through the divorce. I mean, in retrospect, it was silly, but then I just felt so lost that I actually went into this. We went outside, like the whole, like there was like 40, 50 of us who were deciding to be baptized that day. And we went outside and there's all these pools lined up with people who worked for the church with the name of the church around the pools. And I went over and got in and they dunked me. And I think they said in the name of Jesus Christ or something. And then I'm soaking wet and you get like a t-shirt that says I'm saved. So I leave there with my I'm saved t-shirt soaking wet. And I'm like, okay, maybe this something good was going to happen. The next day I got a goddamn ear infection. And I'm like, there's my, there you go. I should never have done that. So I went back to my Jewish roots after that. But yeah.
Brett, that's insane.
That's in the script. That's
That's amazing. So talk to me about this film. You started writing it with a co-writer, and you gave the story to Rudy and said, hey, Rudy, go for it, knock it out. What was kind of the process of you not writing the script yourself? Because I mean, I think with The Track, which was based on one of your films, your shorter films, like you didn't write that script either. Matt wrote that script.
Right.
Why don't you write the scripts?
I'm not a writer. I feel like I went to school for directing. I'm more comfortable doing that. I'm not a writer. I hate being at the computer. It's like a nightmare for me. So yeah, the way I collaborated with Matt McHugh on The Track is similar how I collaborated with Rudy Burman, who was actually a former student who then went to the master's, got her MFA in dramatic writing. And we just always were friends because we're the same age. And she went through a divorce as well. And we would always kind of like talk about that experience. And we wanted to make something together and write something together. So I think we created the story together, the outline together, but she did the writing. And she's, that's her expertise. And then hopefully I can bring my directing skill set to it. But I did share a lot of my own personal experiences in it.
And you're collaborating a lot in the making of this movie with your former students or from people there in Vegas. Like, talk to me, because my partner, my producer and I are talking to people who are now talking about shooting in Vegas and how Vegas is kind of becoming a place to film. And you seem to be doing all right out in Vegas. This is your second movie that you'll be shooting in Vegas, but it seems like you're finding some collaborators out there. Are these former students? Are these people a little mix of both? What are you finding out there?
To be honest with you, I'm from New York, so I've shot in New York and I've shot in California. And the coolest thing about Vegas is that it's not a tiny city. It's 2 million people, but it's not a big city. So they're not jaded. A lot of the, businesses, they're cool with letting you film for free in exchange for publicity. They want to help out. They want to be involved. They're not annoyed, you know what I'm saying? And there is a small community here that is amazing, that like people help each other in a way that I couldn't even believe my eyes. I'm like, when I first moved here, I saw it, like I got it. Like, someone who knows someone and you help each other out in this community because it's so small and because everyone knows everyone. It's getting bigger. And a lot of it are students. So my students, this is actually going to be shot as part of a class next semester with my producer, Mei Mei Luong, who's also an alum, who's now a local producer. And we're going to do it as a class, me and her together. And we're going to shoot during the class. And the students are going to work as the crew. But we will also have professionals. So alums who are now professionals, kind of like heading departments. So we have a great DP who's an alum, who's now works professionally in Vegas. He'll DP it, but he'll have students underneath him learning and working. Our editor is a faculty member in our department. And then he'll actually teach this as a class in the spring, and we'll have students cutting it in the spring under his guidance. So it's like this mixture of, it's a teaching experience, but it's also a movie. And it's really fun, to be honest. It's like, it's not for everyone, but for me, I've kind of found this way of making films that works, mixing the teaching in with the actual creating and being artistic and collaborating. And it works for me and I enjoy it.
Well, Let's talk a little bit about what we got to do to get this movie up and going. I mean, clearly you're using a lot of the resources there at school, which is smart. I'm not going to say exploitative. It's smart.
Yes.
And the students are going to be stoked. Like I have college film students. They all want to collaborate with you. They're all excited about your projects and hearing what's going on and this and that. I love my students, but you actually, I don't like collaborating with them until after I graduate, until after they graduate, and because I don't know, I don't, I don't want to feel influenced to give them a good grade. but does
Yeah.
that make sense? But
Yeah,
but,
I get
but
it.
here you're working with your students, and I mean, what happens if they suck? Do they get a bad grade or do they get fired?
I think what usually happens, and I've done this multiple times, not
For real?
with a feature. I've done it
Oh,
with like
shorts.
we've done short docs, a lot of short
Okay.
docs. And usually for clients, local clients, like we just did one that was really cool for the law school. We did a piece on a community that was it's a historic African American community that's been around since the 50s, and it's been sinking because of subsidence, and their houses are cracking apart, and the city of North Las Vegas isn't doing anything to help them.
You're talking about literally it is sinking into the ground?
It's something out here that I think it happens in California too, but because
Sure.
we have like faults and because of the soil, there's things that when it was built, they didn't do certain tests they should have done because they didn't have access to it. But usually, if it was a more
Affluent.
yes neighborhood, they would have fixed them. But because it's not, they taken advantage of these residents. And so the law school had been approached by a local Nevada senator, Dina Neal, to do something. And they said, let's make a documentary, a short doc, and see if that could help influence change. So my students in my class, we made this doc. And, there's a couple that fall, underwhelm you. But I gotta say the majority did kind of rise to the occasion, especially because I find when you give them a situation like this, where it's like it's an actual project that's going to be seen. Are you working for a client? It causes them to rise to the occasion because, it gets under their skin and they're like, oh God, this is real. So for me, it's like, it kind of works out. But sometimes you have to supplement if something falls, so that's why I always kind of give multiple people a position. So like if one of them
They can
falls
cover
out,
for each other.
yeah.
And if it's successful, maybe some lady will see it in the theater and invite them to Atlanta to get yelled at by Stephen Baldwin.
Exactly. Look at the potential.
So talk to me about the Indiegogo with the what I'm saying is with the resources that you're getting from students from school. I mean, clearly you got to pay for things like food, you got to pay for wardrobe and art and this and that. Is this a period piece too? Does this week take place?
No, it's
Okay,
not a period
a lot of
piece.
the influences feel like the grunge era.
Totally. It's a 90s, like we references the 90s because the main character, Rose, who's 40, and goes through a divorce, she like is so lost, and her therapist is like, you need to reconnect with a time that you were happier. So she reconnects with that time in the 90s when she worked at college in a coffee shop, and she loved the music, and she was a grunge rock girl, and it inspires her by dressing that way again, listening to the music again, taking a job at a local dive coffee shop, which is now 90s nostalgia. It reconnects her with that time period. And then she starts writing again and creating again. So that's kind of where the 90s, while it's not a period piece, the 90s influence is there. And there's a local coffee shop that just opened here that we're hoping to use that has all 90s nostalgia. It has like a Kurt Cobain signed one of the benches. They're from Seattle and they just opened here. So, but ultimately, yes, I'm going to put some of my own money into this. We're going to use resources at the school. We're going to use all their equipment. We're going to use some of the locations at school. But what we really just need money for is I would like to pay our actors, feed everybody, production insurance, if we have to do some locations. But again, this is super low budget for a feature film. We did it before for the tracks. Similarly, we did some of the fundraise. This is not the full budget, but it's probably would be a third of the budget that we need to raise on Indiegogo if we can, is our goal.
And so Geekscape is one place to go is go to Indiegogo and search Riot in Bloom. Riot, like, punk rock. You're gonna go Riot. Riot in Bloom, and then Riot in Bloom on Instagram as well. That's the handle on Instagram, is Riot in Bloom. What are some of these incentives? I'm kind of scrolling the page and looking at some of the incentives. Geekscape is for like $10. You can help the film out. And you can also spend 20, 50. What are some of the things that you get? You're just sending money, right? Like you don't get like a
Yeah.
copy of the
No,
film, right?
well, you get you can get, like, we'll name a character after you. If you want to come, we have a visit to the set. We're offering a free filmmaking class with any member of the crew that you like. We're offering, if you want to be an extra in the film, things like that, where you get to collaborate. Or if you want to come to the premiere for the higher perks. And they're all named after grunge rock bands. But they're really kind of, if you want to be, and if you don't want any of those things, you just want to, donate, please do that as well. But there are ways to get involved, I guess, with the project. And so for people who maybe are interested in film and want to get kind of their eyes opened and be part of it, they can.
Heidi Cox, do we know Heidi? Yeah, we know Heidi. Heidi's in the comments and she goes, I get reality bites
Yes,
vibes on this one.
Heidi gets me. That's totally one of the influences that I gave to our students, and to the logo. The logo was created with that in mind. That's like one of my favorite films. I love, like, the Ethan Hawke, Winona Ryder love story. Totally. Yes, Heidi, thank you for mentioning that. As well as Singles is another film that I just loved from the 90s.
I got to tell you, Brett, somebody brought this up on Twitter because Ben Stiller directed Reality Bites. And they were bringing up the Ben Stiller directing career trajectory, because then obviously he does like Cable Guy, and then he does Tropic Thunder, and I'm skipping a few. Zoolander's in there before Tropic Thunder, but now what you see, some of the stuff that he's doing for like HBO with Severance, the directing is
I love
phenomenal.
that show.
So Ben Stiller starts with like Reality Bites and ends up with like Severance, and he's just turned himself into like a really gutsy. I think every choice he's made as a director, including stuff like Cable Guy, is pretty bold and strange, because like Cable Guy I think people were mad that it wasn't just a Jim Carrey comedy at the time, so it bombed. But it was
dark.
actually like it was super dark. I
like that he evolves, like that people can evolve. Empire Records, absolutely. I love the soundtracks to all these films. I see what. Yeah, sorry.
Heidi continued to comment in the Geekscapists who are listening to this and are like, "What is happening?" Heidi kept commenting in the comments, and it sounds like she and Brett are
we connect.
Yeah, y'all know each other. Y'all get it.
We feel each other.
Okay, so Geekscapists, you got a couple of missions in front of you. The first is just go to Instagram and look up Riot in Bloom and subscribe to their Instagram. But really, you can donate really any amount of money to the Indiegogo. And Indiegogo is not one of those things where you have to hit the goal or you get nothing, right? Like whatever you donate, you get, right?
We'll take whatever we raise, and we're going to make the film regardless. But we put a budget there. We're aspiring for, but if we don't hit it, we're still going to make the film. And that's the whole thing about indie filmmaking. We're trying to teach our students, if you got to rewrite it to make it cheaper, you're going to find a way to do that. And that's what we plan to do.
So Geekscapists, you're going to go to Indiegogo and you're going to search for Riot and Bloom. That's what you're going to do. And then throw some bucks Brett's way. I mean, listen, we don't, she's fallen on hard times earlier in her life. We don't want her going back to like the freaking water world of like the church evangelical stuff. That was insane. That's like Splash Mountain of freaking evangelicals. Like, you got a t-shirt. Hey, do you still have the t-shirt?
I think I do.
If you still have the t-shirt,
yeah.
We have to let the Baldwin dude know that
I just sent it to him. Yeah.
Yeah, you should just take a picture in the t-shirt and say, hey,
I was saved.
Baldwin brother you are. I ended up taking your advice. It changed my life. Do you want to come be in our movie, Riot and Bloom?
I know. There's a role for you.
I think we're good on that one.
Yeah.
Don't do that. Don't do that. Brett, it's been amazing catching up. I think we got some incredible stories out of it. And Geekscape is, what do y'all think of Brett? I'm sure you'll enjoy these stories. The stories are insane. Your stories are insane. And you know what, Brett? I don't like Vegas. You know what?
But I
Like,
don't think you know Vegas. I like to
I
show
think
you
that's the truth. I think
that I didn't know
that
Vegas either.
that is
There's
the truth.
hiking. So at the end of the story, I didn't end up meeting a nice new person who I got married to 3 years ago. My current husband, and everything is turned out right in the end. So I see the whole point of going through the divorce. I met someone who is like way more compatible with me, but he has taught me about Vegas. He's from here, so he loves hiking, camping, kayaking, and he's exposed all that to me. And so if you guys come out here, I'll show you that part of Vegas, and I think you'll enjoy it.
The last time we were there was for a Star Trek convention. Heidi was attending. And that was a fun way to go to Vegas, is hang out in a hotel and just have a bunch of Trekkies walking around. And I also like, I do like the outdoors in Vegas and running and stuff like that. It's beautiful.
Yes.
But the party stuff is kind of like, oh, that's a little exhausting.
I stay away from. We don't even go to the Strip. Like I realized, real Las Vegas people don't go to the Strip. We have our own little communities. There's a lot of things also culturally that are growing. A lot of Californians are coming in here, unfortunately, because then our housing prices are rising, since people could work from home. So we're getting a lot of that. We're a blue state, so we're very liberal, which is cool. And, no one knew about Vegas, and I didn't either. I'm like, it's just the Strip. But honestly, it looks like a California suburb, most of it. We're in Henderson, which is the suburbs out here, and there's a downtown that's starting to grow. I'm actually also part of the Nevada Women's Film Festival. We just had that last weekend, and it was really fun. So there's so that's growing, and culturally things are growing, and it's very diverse here too, which is nice. So that helps.
Okay. Well, we're going to take you up on the offer. We'll go out to Vegas and hang out with you guys.
Yes.
And I love this catch up. I think I agree with Rudy, your writer here, and she says Brett rules. So
thanks, Rudy.
Brett, thank you so much for coming on the show. And Geekscape, go check out Indiegogo and go find Riot and Bloom and donate whatever you can, because we got to see this movie made the way Brett wants to make it. Love you so much, Brett. Geekscape, if you want to hang out with us, all you got to do is find Geekscape on any of the social media you got, or on Facebook, or on Instagram. I think some of us are on TikTok. We're on Twitter. We're on all of it. And then, of course, subscribe to any of the Geekscape shows on any podcatcher you got. We got filmmaking podcasts, we got wrestling podcasts, we got horror podcasts, we got video game podcasts, we got comedy podcasts, we got all sorts of podcasts on the Geekscape network. Search for Geekscape, and you should have something that scratches the itch if this is your first Geekscape podcast. As always, share us with your friends, subscribe, and when you do, go to that little podcatcher you're listening to us on and leave us a 5-star review. That really helps out our visibility. We got tons of guests coming up in the next few weeks that I've been scheduling. So I'm really excited to talk to more people like Brett about filmmaking or video games or acting or writing or comic books. So strap yourselves in, subscribe, and we'll see you next week. Thanks.